HVAC 360, episode number 79. Alerton Controls from the AHR Expo. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of HVAC 360. I'm your host, Matt Nelson. This week is the last of the episodes that I've gotten out of the archives, the evergreen content. This one was especially interesting because this week I get to talk to Kevin Callahan, who is the product owner and evangelist, and in fact still is 3 years later for Alerton Controls. So I caught up with him at the AHR Expo, and I spent a good deal of time with him. We actually didn't record on the floor of the AHR Expo, which normally is the case. Instead, I had some time to gather my thoughts, and I got to interview him after the fact. So the audio is going to be a little bit better on this episode, and you're going to be able to hear what we're discussing. I mean, some of the interesting things is just how the temperature controls industry is evolving. And some of the neat things that are out there on the market and what it can do and what the future holds for it. So a lot of that is still relevant, so I'm excited to get this last episode out to you for your listening pleasure. And without further ado, let's cut to the tape with Kevin Callahan. We're talking today with Kevin Callahan, who is the product owner and evangelist over at Alerton. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Excellent, Matt.
So, first off, I gotta ask you, because your job title, product owner and evangelist. I mean, I kind of get the evangelist part, but product owner kind of throws me. What does that mean?
So, even though I'm part of the product management group, and that's kind of the department I belong to, I'm embedded into R&D, and I sit with the software developers. As a product owner, I help drive the priorities that get developed into the Compass software product, and then I look at defects, and I help prioritize which defects need to be resolved first versus, next or last. I help in the planning, give them the objectives that we want to develop in the next development cycle. In the last 3 years, we've embraced an agile development model where our development is done in 8-week cycles, and those are called project increments. And so within that 8-week cycle, we identify what value can we deliver to the market, and then I help prioritize that and guide that. And then when they have questions specifically around, well, how does the user use that, or what's the purpose of this, or is this the right way to show it, then I help answer those questions and keep them on task. The 8-week cycle is divided up into 4 2-week cycles. And the beauty of that, compared to the traditional waterfall method where you develop a product over 18 months and then it's delivered to the market and customers go, yeah, I kind of wanted that 18 months ago, but now I don't want it anymore. Because we work in 8-week cycles and those are broken up into 2-week chunks, we can change course quickly, and we can embrace new technologies as they come about in the marketplace and in our business. So that's kind of the product owner aspect.
All right, so we got the kind of the name, the title thing out of the way. What if somebody didn't know anything about Alerton? What's your elevator pitch on what Alerton is and what they do for the industry?
I wish my wife were here because she does a better job of it than I do. Because it's like, what'd your husband do? So Alerton, here at Alerton, we design, and we used to manufacture when we were a private company, but now the manufacturing is all done in Honeywell's manufacturing facilities. here in North America. But so we design hardware and software for the monitoring and control of building systems. And building sizes range from, they could be a retail store, typically a group of retail stores spread out geographically, up to a 76-story office building, or even a 100-building campus the size of Microsoft. So our software monitors the building systems through our controllers. We have a line of field controllers, programmable controllers that go on terminal units out in the spaces within the buildings. And then we also design and manufacture larger controllers for central plants, chillers, boilers, and whatnot. And so we control those processes to maintain the comfort conditions within a building: temperature, humidity, pressure, CO2, and then the software allows you to monitor those areas graphically through graphic displays on a PC screen or on a tablet, and then they're able to manipulate the system, change set points, schedule the system for occupied, unoccupied hours, set up alarms for when systems aren't performing as they should be, set up trend logs so they could view the history of the systems, how they've been performing over time. Especially, that's very critical for troubleshooting and commissioning. And then we also have energy logs, so we can monitor energy in the building, look at how the building profile is over time with the occupancy and the energy consumption. We also have some features that allow demand limiting, so we can monitor the energy in the building, and we could turn loads on and off to limit peak demand charges, as well as spread the set points apart to make the cooling set point higher and the heating set point lower to save energy. So that's kind of the elevator speech. My wife usually says it's kind of like the thermostat on the wall. That's the kind of stuff he does, and people go, "Oh."
Heating and cooling. Okay, exactly.
Heating and cooling. Comfort conditions.
So you have, obviously you have software. That's a big component of what you do. You have the products. And does your product line basically end with the brains, the controls, and doesn't really get to the like actuators or the boxes or anything like that? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
We don't. Yeah, because we don't. Alerton came about in the early 80s with the onset of the microprocessors becoming more affordable at the commercial level. And so the traditional control companies, Honeywell, Johnson, back in the day, Robert Shaw, Barber Coleman, MCC Powers, which now has become Siemens. They were the big five, and they pretty much owned the market, and everything was pneumatic, and anything that was computerized was a huge computer that would fit into a room, and all they really did was scheduling and alarming and some graphics. They really didn't do much beyond that. And so Alerton was one of the wave of companies that took all those pneumatic controls and put them down into a circuit board using microprocessors, and then distributed it around a building. So we're talking Alerton, Automated Logic, Stafa, and then Delta would be close onto that. So those are the ones that basically came on the market, but we weren't manufacturers like Honeywell and Johnson and Robert Shaw and Barber Coleman and Powers, Siemens, because we didn't make actuators, and we didn't make dampers, and we didn't make relays and things. We just had the brains. And so we would, our distribution, our contractors and our dealers, they would take our controllers and our software, and then they would go buy products off the shelf. They'd buy Siemens actuators or Honeywell actuators or Belimo actuators. They'd go to people like Kelly and Associates and get all the parts and pieces, because really, a sensor is a sensor. A thermistor in the duct is a thermistor in the duct typically. But the one thing that Alerton did was that we came up with a communicating wall sensor. People call it a thermostat, which, thermostat is something that turns something on and off. But this is really a communicating wall module, and it senses temperature, humidity, CO2. It allows the occupant to change the set point. It allows the occupant to schedule the space when it's after hours in unoccupied periods. They can go occupied for a set period of time. So really we have the wall sensor that connects to our field controller, that connects to our building controller, that connects to the software. So we have it basically from top to bottom, our products, but what we design and manufacture. And then it's those field devices, like you said, sensors and actuators, that pretty much you can use anything off the shelf for that.
Right, and I think in general, I would say it's kind of a benefit to the owner because you're not locked into a proprietary component that you have to buy.
Exactly, and there's different processes require a different level of product. If it's a data center and they want it to be more industrial than a commercial office building, then they could buy industrial grade valves and sensors and actuators, which makes sense.
Right. So you mentioned Honeywell there, and I know that you're involved with Honeywell. So could you explain a little bit about your relationship with Honeywell?
So Alerton was founded in 1981 by three gentlemen, and then in 2003, the two remaining gentlemen that owned Alerton, they sold it to a company out of the UK. And that company was also owned Novar and also owned Trend Controls, which is very big in Europe and in Asia. And so Alerton became part of that group, and then Honeywell stepped up in 2005 and bought this company out of the UK. They went by the name of Novar PLC. And so Trend, Alerton, and Novar now became brands of Honeywell. So Alerton is a brand of Honeywell, and we're in this family of brands. We're all sort of cousins now, and a lot of people don't realize how big Honeywell is. They have four businesses. They do aerospace. A lot of cockpits are designed by Honeywell. A lot of people don't know that in the history of Honeywell, they're the ones that came up with the black box, which is really orange, that they talk about when there's an air disaster, and lots of amazing software, especially GPS-related technologies to keep it so planes don't run into things. It's pretty amazing what they do on the aerospace side. Transportation, Honeywell is a leader in turbos for cars and trucks, diesel turbos, which is pretty amazing. Volkswagens, for example, have Honeywell turbos. And then they do specialty materials and whatnot. And the business that Alerton is in is automated controls and solutions, and that's the traditional Honeywell controls that people remember from years and years and years ago, all the way back to 1890s when Honeywell was founded in Minneapolis. And so we're kind of in a division within that called combustion and controls systems, commercial control systems. In this, our cousins include Novar, which their market is big box retail, the Walmarts and the Lowe's and the Home Depots, and then there's the Honeywell building control systems, and they do their controls are sold through distribution of distributors, over-counter sales to contractors and whatnot. And then Alerton, our distribution is to an authorized dealer network throughout North America, and then expanding throughout the world. We've had some long-time international dealers, but we're gaining momentum in the high-growth regions. And so Alerton is looked at as the brand within Honeywell that targets segments like the K-12 segment we're big in, data centers we're big in, pharma, hospitals, university campuses, and large building campuses, so large systems with lots of integration. Alerton was one of the early adopters and sort of the founders, so to speak, of BACnet out in the marketplace. So when the ASHRAE released BACnet specification back in the late 90s, Alerton, Automated Logic, and Delta were like the three smaller companies that were the first to market with full BACnet systems. And so within Honeywell, Alerton is looked at as the BACnet expert in the BACnet system, as opposed to the proprietary systems like LAN is open, so to speak, but not like BACnet is. And then, of course, within Honeywell is Tritium, and a lot of us are leveraging Tritium's Niagara framework as an underlying piece within our system, software and hardware.
And how, if I could ask you to expound upon that, how exactly is that happening? I mean, I've run into Tritium, and I have this understanding of their kind of their overlay for certain municipalities and things like that. That's a benefit. But you're saying the underlying architecture of that you're incorporating to what you do?
Right. So we'll take their framework, which really is what what Tritium's developed over the last 15 plus years. Is this framework that you can build upon. You can build applications upon it, and its strength lies in the fact that it's a middleware. Some people in early on, I mistakenly referred to their products as gateways, and I was corrected by a colleague who said gateways just translate, and you have nothing more than just translating one language to another. But the power of the Niagara framework is as a middleware, I can bring in systems of disparate protocols. I can normalize them within Niagara, and then I can go back out to those disparate systems and control and schedule an alarm from them, and I can log them. And so the beauty there is I could take BACnet and LAN and Modbus, and I could take Andover's proprietary. I can take the old CSI proprietary, American Automatrix. I think there's drivers for that. So a lot of people have stepped up and made drivers, basically applications built on top of the Niagara framework. And so we've taken it and we're using it in our development of our Compass software to leverage that framework, as well as in our Ascent Control module, the ACM. We put a Niagara station within the ACM to allow integration to those disparate systems, bringing them all into a single BACnet system.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to, for the layman here and for myself, define framework. I hear the word framework a lot. What does that framework mean when you say framework?
It's more than an operating system. It's sort of I guess framework would imply that it's a platform that you can build upon. So it's like someone saying, what's a good explanation of that? A good example might be Linux. I mean, Linux is an operating system, but it's also a platform that people have built upon.
I mean, does it come with like a toolkit that you use, or?
Yep. They have a toolkit. They have developer toolkits, for people that want to build drivers and whatnot. And a lot of it's pretty basic. To build upon it. It's not unlike taking Excel and building a Visual Basic application using Excel to do things. So it's like having this foundation, and then it has a bunch of hooks to it, and then I can just get in there and build upon it and build different applications, which a lot of people have done.
Okay. So now, I mean, you mentioned the Ascent Compass software. Now, that was one of the things that you had on display at the Expo there in Chicago. Obviously, you've come out with your basic system back in '81 when Alerton was first starting out. What does this latest version have that people would be interested in?
Well, so we built upon our legacy or our current Envision for Backtalk Alerton Building Suite, which was Envision for Backtalk, the software, and then we had a component called WebTalk that gave you web access into the system from a browser client. And so Compass, we've sort of taken that to the next step and incorporated it, the two into one software, and now everything, all access into the system is through a browser. So it's where the industry is going. It's where it is now. Pretty much all the manufacturers that I spoke of, they're all going to where everything's browser based. You just basically have this software that's running as a service or application, and you don't really go to the computer to access the system. You just hit that web server in the computer that you've installed, and then you have everything presented to you through the browser. And so it's a big step for us to provide that. Because in the process, we wanted to get away from Java, as everyone has wanted to get away from Java, because it's just become a pain with all the security issues around Java and having to keep updating it. And so Compass uses the current HTML5 protocol for the web, and what we've stressed in the development of Compass is the user workflows and the ease of use. Alerton has been known traditionally throughout its history as being a very easy to use, easy to install, easy to engineer product, and so we've just taken that to the next level as we develop our browser-based system Compass, and really gone in and looked at how to make it easier for a user to do scheduling, to make it easier for a user to navigate around the system, and easier for a user to set up alarms and schedules and trend logs and view trend logs.
I mean, that's ultimately critical. I mean, with the, basically I see this education disparity. You really no longer in most situations have somebody who's operating a building that really has, knowledgeable, in-depth. You need some software that's more intuitive, that's going to help them kind of, check the basic boxes, just to be able to say, okay, here's how you should operate your system. Here's what you do every morning when you get in. You have your cup of coffee, you check, make sure there's, no alarms or whatever. But I mean, that's kind of where the market's going in a simplistic fashion, because I see it from two different standpoints. I see it from, the very technical technician level where they're trying to get everything to work. And then I also see it from the maintenance angle, where the maintenance guy is like, okay, now what do I do? I gotta learn how to navigate around here, and being intuitive obviously helps that.
Exactly. And one of the things we did as we began developing the Ascent products and the Compass software was we went out and we hired a user experience designer. It's called a UX user interface, a UX UI designer. And this individual has been critical in teaching us and helping formulate how the workflows are, and what is the user doing? What's their goal? What's the task at hand? And how to present that to them in an easy to understand and easy to do interface. He's taught me a lot about user design and user experience workflows, and then I in turn have taught him a lot about the industry and what it is that we're making and why we're making it and who we're making it for. He came out of the gaming industry, so his understanding of ease of use and presentation of information and data through a computer is pretty cool. And so that's really the focus, because it's very it could be very complicated to operate a building if you don't understand what it is that's in the building. So one of the things that we have in Compass that we use to simplify it is we have a navigation tree that's a very easy thing to create using an Excel spreadsheet. And in that navigation tree, you can set it up. And I give the example when I'm out evangelizing. I say, well, there's three questions that typically happen with somebody running a building. It's the first question is, well, where is the person who's called me? Where are they located, and where in the building are they complaining about comfort conditions? So I could present the building in a location sort of, first floor, this office, second floor, this office. kind of navigation. But at the same time, I could also present it in a systems perspective. Here's a VAV box, and it's being supplied by this rooftop unit. So they could see that relationship. And that rooftop unit's being supplied by this chiller and this boiler. So when they go to troubleshoot it, they could say, oh, the room's uncomfortable, but the VAV box is doing what it's supposed to be doing. Oh, the rooftop unit's not providing cold enough air. It's the chiller. It isn't operating correctly. So it's easy for them to see those system relationships. And then, of course, the third view is more from a technical aspect for installation. It's sort of a network view. I have this global controller, and it has these field controllers underneath it. I have this router, and I have these devices underneath it. And, of course, with the way you can set up users, not everybody can see all the views. You get a mechanical contractor or someone like you, Matt, who understands systems, and you're going to look at the systems view or the network view, but you get a building operator, and that can be very confusing and almost overwhelming to them. They just want to know, where in the building do I need to send somebody to go find out what's going on.
So now, you get, obviously, the user interface, and just kind of for a general person, what they're looking for. So you make it look user-friendly. You kind of use your insight into the industry. But I guess, is there a mechanism for you to get feedback from the end user saying, hey, you know what, I wish it would do this, or I wish it would do that?
I wish it was easier for me. So what I do is I go out and visit our dealers and their customers a lot. I go out easily once a month. I'm on the road. For instance, next week I'm going to the New York City area to meet with our dealers there and a couple customers. And really, I was going there just to meet with one of our dealers, and I said, well, I'm there. I'd like to go talk to a couple customers that have our product and find out, just like you said, what do you like, what don't you like? How can I make it better? Where do you get frustrated? But I also want to know what they like, because if they tell me what they like, then I know we should make more of that. and I want to know what they don't like, because we should make less of that kind of thing. And so I'd love it if we could, and maybe eventually I talk about putting in something where it's like, feedback to Alerton, press this button and tell us what you like and don't like. It's akin to smartphone apps with the rate this app, right? App developers, that's like a beautiful feedback mechanism.
There you go. You just have to have a pop-up.
Yep. Rate this product. And so many people are doing that now, but I'll get there. It's baby steps. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
So I guess you've had this new software how long on the market?
So we released Compass 1.0 in January of 2014, and then and it was a basic system. It didn't have everything in it that we wanted it, but we wanted to get it in the market as soon as possible. We wanted to get it in the hands of our dealers and their customers and the users, because I wanted that immediate feedback. I wanted to know, are we on the right path? Are we going in the right direction? So it was essentially, it did everything that our current product did through the web. That's the Alerton Building Suite with Envision for Backtalk and WebTalk. And knowing that we were going to be adding more of the features and functionality that would be accessed through the browser. And so we got a bunch of feedback. And remember, I talked about the 8-week development cycle. So we went through we went through 2 of those 8-week cycles, and then in April timeframe, April-May, we delivered a Compass 1.1, and we added more features and more functionality. But again, the customer said, hey, I want more of this. I want to be able to do everything that I need to do with schedules, trends, and alarms through the browser. I don't want to have to go to the workstation and sit at the computer and do that. And so knowing that full well, we then delivered all of those features in November of 2014 with Compass 1.2. And currently we're in the final cycle of getting ready to release Compass 1.3 in May, in the May timeframe, and it's really targeted to high growth regions in the international market. And the big piece here is the localization, allowing our international dealers in China, in Central and Latin America, South America, and in the Middle East and North Africa to be able to localize the web user interface into their local language. And one of the cool things we did in that is they can translate the web UI, the product, through lexicon files into the various languages. So we have some guys doing Spanish, we have guys doing French Canadian, we have someone doing French for North Africa, we have someone doing Portuguese for Brazil. And then I can have all of those files in the system, and then if I set my browser to the local language that I want to view in the browser, then they can connect to a Compass system, and everything's presented to them in their local language. And the beauty of that is I can connect to the system and see everything in French, and then Matt, you can connect to the system and the same system and see everything in English. And that, I think that's kind of a cool feature. A lot of our dealers and customers here in North America, especially the United States, are like, well, that doesn't really have value to me. And I said, oh, wait a minute, though. In California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, South Florida, all of those border states in South Florida where there's a lot of Spanish-speaking individuals, that makes it really easy for them to operate the system because now they get it in their native language. If they're, ESL individuals where English is a second language, and of course we're going to add some more value features. So that's the next release here coming up. Excellent.
So I guess aside from some of the language things, which those are fascinating. What are end users most, what's their number one thing? I mean, you mentioned scheduling. Is there anything else that they're kind of, all up in arms about, like, hey, I need this, or, it's good enough, but, yeah, I mean, are they incremental changes, or is it, bigger things they're looking for?
Well, the big push now is getting applications in the cloud, using the cloud infrastructure, leveraging that. And the big push now is analytics, fault detection, and diagnostics. So it's the continuous commissioning aspect. I want to be able to. I want my system to tell me, once I've got it configured, once I have it operating, I want it to tell me, is it operating at optimum performance, and if not, where is it not functioning correctly? So examples of that would be looking at economizers are classic things that fail and add cost to the operation of a building. If the outside air damper and return air damper actuators, if they have an issue and I'm not closing those outside air dampers like I should, that means I'm bringing in outside air and I'm spending money to condition that. So if I can monitor that and look at the performance of that economizer section of an air handling unit, then I can get a warning that, hey, this looks like it's not functioning correctly. Because what you do, Matt, is commissioning, and you go in and you get it so you say, yep, everything is operating exactly as it should. It's all operating, per the spec and per the sequence, and everything's golden. But over time, something might happen. The shaft on the actuator might slip, or the connection might loosen, and usually people don't find that out until they've spent a lot of money on energy costs. And other things are looking at the energy consumption within a building. People want to know, where am I using energy? Where is energy being used that it should not be used? And so connecting into the various systems to monitor, like, plug loads and monitor sub-meters. So I think the next big push that users want, again, is that analytics, the fault detection and diagnostics, the presentation of information, better presentation, graphs and graphic displays that inform easily without having to think about it. I should be able to look at a floor plan and go, oh, that room's hot. Oh, that room's cold. And then go find out why.
Absolutely. I guess a couple of things, at least from my standpoint, is that when you get into that fault detection, that analytics, I've really seen some, I guess, big issues with the data. Data is always streaming, out of the building automation system, and just being able to capture that in a meaningful way and store the historic, trending. Some systems just they can't do it. That's a big issue with some systems, depending on if you have an engineer who says, hey, you know what, I want to trend everything, and you kind of look at him and go,
yep.
Do you really know what you're saying?
Right.
Especially when you get multiple buildings and you're trying to dial into a browser, and it just why is it not why is the graphic not coming up? Well, because it's bogged down in collecting data.
Right. And that's a real frustration, when you go to a system and it's like, look at all these alarms you have set up here. Do you do anything with these? And usually the user will say, nah, I just ignore them. How about we go through and delete them all, and let's sit down and talk about what really is important to you. What are you going to take action on instead of how someone else thought it should be set up. I always find that interesting. And the data collection, Matt, like you said, it's great that they can collect all that data, but it ends up being garbage if you're not going to do anything with it.
Right. Absolutely.
You got to do something with it. And so that's that. The analytics and the fault detection and the diagnostics, and then to do things like monetize that analytics and that fault detection, so that the guy says, well, I have 4 things that aren't operating correctly. Which one should I work on? Well, let's monetize it. That one you should work on, because if we don't fix that one, then we're going to spend X amount more in energy costs. So it makes it easy to prioritize what should be worked on.
Now, obviously, you kind of talk about this analytics as, and in the industry, there are some people that, are all hyped up about it. It's still, in my opinion, it's not quite there yet. But
it's not.
You talk about it being integrated into your build, your software. And do you envision a time when you're like, we're going to have, these 6 things, and they're going to be, monitored for you. So there's no setup involved, realistically, maybe a little bit on the front end by the installer, but there's nothing that the owner has to do. It'll always, it'd already be set up.
So now you're getting into my vision. And my vision for Alerton and the industry and what the users need. One of the things that I'm pushing for is we're getting ready to refresh our field controllers, because they're getting pretty long in the tooth. And one of those automatic things, and you kind of spoke to it about logging every point. Well, I want to do that. I want to make it so that every point that you're using in the field controller is being logged locally in the field controller. However, that doesn't mean all that information gets pushed up into the cloud, up into the database, because not all that information is important. And allowing you, the commissioning agent, or me, the control contractor, or working together with the user, saying, well, I'm logging these 200 points in that controller, but only about 10 of them we need to bring up to the cloud to really do the analytics. The reason I want to log all those points in the controller is because if there's something going wrong in that controller, I want to be able to look back over the past 72 hours or 96 hours, ideally get a week's worth of data there that I can look at and go, oh, I see what's going on. So that piece is that automatic, set it and forget it kind of the configuration. But my real vision is that I truly believe that one day we'll be able to take an artificial intelligence, sort of a distributed artificial intelligence is what I call it in my vision, where the analytics are such that they're watching how the building is performing, because you and I, as the control contractor and the commissioning agent, we set it up and we said, all right, here's the baseline. Here's how the building operates, and then that cloud analytics looks at it over time, and eventually it might say to the user, I've noticed that people come in early and put the system into manual override. Would you like to adjust your schedules? And usually ask, it would be one of those ones where they ask the building operator, you should do this. And then eventually it might say, would you like me to do that for you? And then eventually it's like, I'll just do it for you and I won't tell you, but I'll let you know in a report once a month what I did to make your building operate better. That aspect is what I think is the future of all of this analytics and cloud computing, is to help the building operator make decisions. Because, like you said earlier, it's an experience education limitation of the workforce. They don't really understand the systems. They don't understand the interaction between the chill water plant and the air distribution and the energy consumption and the people coming and going, and somebody's got to help them with that. Right, and
I got to imagine, as I've gone through that iteration a couple of times. I mean, there's only so many things. I mean, if a VAV box is doing something wrong, there's only so many. There's going to be a couple telltale signs where you're going to be able to monitor that. But it could be critical at any one location. I mean, data center, things, even the smallest things to monitor. It doesn't. I guess you have an AI that kind of monitors this data, and it doesn't take them any more to do 100 trends than to do 10,000 trends. It's a matter of milliseconds to kind of flag whatever's doing that. So that's
exactly.
I like to predict. I'm like, okay, so if this is true and you're going to integrate it into your current system, either I learn how to do, multiple different, trend logs and analytics, for Alerton or Johnson or Siemens or whoever, or, basically you're going to develop something, you're going to eat my lunch and just do it for me, and I'm going to be out of a business model, so to speak.
Actually, though, one of the things that I want to get to is where we're able to build in the features that you as a commissioning agent need that make your job easier. Because I know that you step on the job and it's like, okay, I gotta get this out of the system. I want to know this about the system. And so at some point, when in our development cycle, I want to start addressing the commissioning agent's needs as they relate to the Alerton dealer, to make that part of the installation and turnover of a building easier, especially coming back, right? Because you go back and you recommission, and it'd be nice to know. Well, like it'd be great for you to hit a button and say, "Give me a report on the differences," and then you go away and you look at it and go, "Oh, boy, there's lots of change since I was here when we installed this building." I mean, it's all that data is there, and I just want to make it easier for you to get to it so that you can determine what needs to be, fixed.
Right. But I mean, to my point, at some point, pushing a button, just about anybody can do that. Obviously, knowing what to do with the data that you get back, that's going to be the proposition. Right. It's just going to be
that's the value you add.
Right.
How to discern and decipher all of that information.
Okay, that's fascinating stuff. Now, obviously, I took a look at the Ascent Compass Software, and one of the phrases that struck me was the monitors and controls a whole host of building systems. Now, I mean, you're talking more than HVAC here. You're going into other things. Can you explain a little bit about what that means?
Well, with again. The various protocols, Modbus is a good one where we can look at energy meters, and BACnet being a protocol that a lot of manufacturers and various system vendors have embraced. And again, back to the Niagara framework and being able to monitor and control disparate systems, proprietary protocols. So really, it gets down to, it's more than just HVAC that you need to monitor and control as far as comfort and energy. I've always found it interesting that I have a wall sensor that is controlling the temperature and humidity and pressure within a space, and then next to it is a light switch that has an occupancy sensor on it. Well, really, we only need one thing on the wall to do that, and if they're scheduling the HVAC system based upon, the workday, they shouldn't have to also go into a lighting system and do that same thing. They should be able to set one schedule for the building, and all the systems then react to that schedule. If I walk into a conference room, the occupancy sensor should say, oh, people are in this conference room. I'm going to now run the HVAC system for a non-vacant mode, and I'm going to turn the lights on. So it's really, it's always been the promise of the building automation industry to, connect everything together, but I think it's getting more and more easier to do that.
Now, just based on that example, obviously, the one thing I would say is, there is a, you get into a position where you have multiple trades that, if they say, okay, it's going to be a thermostat / light switch, okay, now who puts it in? Who provides it?
Right.
You get in this discussion between, is it going to be, something that a Lutron would provide, or is it something that Alerton provides? Because it is, you connect, your 120 line voltage to it, there's a problem, or is it just, because I know that there's a lot of different things, and you talk to engineers long enough, and they get some of the times they get these crazy ideas, and that's great for pushing the envelope. But whether you can institute those sequences is another thing. But one of the things that I found interesting is that the lighting control systems have a certain set of functions that they've kind of started to develop, and that's not always necessarily the same as what you'd have on a thermostat. Like you, for instance, there's a some of the WattStopper has a walkthrough mode where if somebody comes in and leaves within 30 seconds, it's not going to turn on the lights.
Right.
So it's
right. And I think that's not. I don't see the Alerton taking over that control. I don't see us doing that, but allowing the two systems to work together.
So you'd basically you'd have a 2-gang box, and you'd plug, you'd put yours right next to the the 120. I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of it now, especially the lighting systems, the LEDs are all, that's low voltage stuff, and then being able to do light harvesting, measure the light coming in from the windows, and then dimming the lights near the windows, because to save energy, because we don't need, we can use the light from outside. That's something that's part of the lighting control system. But as far as the occupancy part, some zones in the building would be the traditional occupancy of a time schedule, in an open office floor plan, let's say. But it's those corridors, like you explained, that aren't typically occupied. It might be a corridor in part of the building that is only accessed every once in a while, or conference rooms, or these. I'm in a phone booth room here in our new office, and because we have a big open office plan, and it has an occupancy sensor for the light switch, but I found that it's overly sensitive. I walk by the room and the light comes on, so it's like, well, I wonder if someone like Matt has commissioned that, because it seems overly sensitive.
Nobody's changed the dip switches, no.
Maybe Matt needs to come and help the building owner understand how to make that work right. So I think it's not where they'll. I don't believe in like one system. It's not like one ring to control all. It's like the connectivity of the systems together so that they work in concert with each other instead of fighting each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's really the driver of it, Matt. It's going to be energy. It's all going to be around. We gotta turn stuff off that doesn't need to be on. We got to make it so that we're only ventilating what we need to ventilate based upon the number of people that are in the space. We don't need to have it on cooling all the time. From a control standpoint, I don't know how you are when you go into the new retail malls in the country where they look like little downtown areas, right? It's not a mall, but they look like a bunch of storefronts. And I've been in parts of the country, Florida, Texas, North Carolina in the summertime, and I walk down those sidewalks, and those retail stores have their doors open. And you feel the blast of cold air coming out of that retail store. And I was asking someone, why do they do that? And the guy said, it's marketing. They're enticing the person to come in because it's cool and they'll feel better as opposed to being out where it's hot and humid. And I thought, what an energy waster that is. I mean, it just boggles my mind that they just have the doors wide open and they're basically, trying to air condition, South Florida.
It's anything. I mean, it's all about what their key performance indicators are, right? If they sell more because they do that, then it's worth the money spent on air conditioning.
The cost of electricity is nothing. Exactly.
Well, we've talked about a lot of things, and I guess if somebody wanted to learn more about this product, what's the best way to do it?
We have the Alerton.com site has some information on the Ascent Compass and the Ascent Control Module and our new Microset 4. There's some information up there. There's also on the website they can locate their authorized Alerton dealer in their market, and they can contact them and to find out more information. And then I think those are the two primary ways to go about it. They could try to hunt me down. It's not very difficult. Now, you told them my name. It doesn't take long to find me.
So, as far as training classes, is that something that's popular at all for somebody who's maybe not necessarily working for a distributor? Is that something that's open to the public? I've seen training classes there, but I don't know if it's specifically directed towards the.
So we'll train anybody, and we don't segregate our training classes between our dealer network and end users, and so. If you were to come to a training class, Matt, you would sit in a class with our dealers, and we would teach you everything that we teach our dealers in how to engineer, install, deploy, commission an Alerton control system from the hardware to the software. And so the only criteria there is you just have to go through an Alerton dealer. That's all you have to do is just contact an Alerton dealer in your market and say, hey, I want to go to the Alerton training class, and then you basically work through them on whatever the costs might be.
Excellent. All right. Well, Kevin, I offer you the last word. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to discuss?
No, gosh, you get me going, and everybody knows that once you start me talking, I'm very difficult to shut up, and the only thing I'm missing is a whiteboard because, I'll jump up on a whiteboard and I'll start drawing pictures. No, I think we covered a lot. It was very interesting. I really enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to talking to you in the future to get your feedback on your needs as a commissioning agent, with systems. So I know you'll hear from me in the future. But otherwise, I want to thank you very much for this opportunity.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin, for being on the show. All right, and we're back. Thanks again to our guest, Kevin Callahan, for taking time out of his schedule to talk to us, the HVAC 360 audience. Thank you for listening and being part of this audience. I really do appreciate it. And I think that, being the top 3%, learning every day, it's good stuff. It's really required, especially when changes are happening in our industry so fast. We need to be able to not only keep up on it, but keep refreshing ourselves to it. I was talking to somebody the other day, and it really kind of, again, hit home when we need the more you know in this industry, the more you've spent time in this industry, the more you realize, hey, there's just so much that I don't know. So not only do you have to keep aggressively learning on the new stuff, but you kind of have to keep revisiting the old stuff so it all keeps fresh in your mind. So I thank you for listening. A couple things. Sign up for my email list. Go to HVAC360.com and sign up for that list. That'll get you all the little tidbits that I'm sending out there kind of behind the scenes. It'll get you in the know. And also, I just want to make sure that if you did like this episode, hey, pass it on. Thank you for listening again. And remember, as always, know what you build, and share what you know.